Wait, he's alive. He's alive. Yeah, wait. Look.
The king.
Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Wait.
Here we are at the Draw Nigh to the Creator series yet again here at Take on the World TV. Got a few people in the live chat here. How have you guys been doing? Let's see. So I was going to do the video last night because I'm trying to do Friday nights more often. And I was extremely tired from work. Like extremely tired and drained. This past work week for me has been rough. And I've been falling asleep laying down my daughter multiple nights in a row. It was kind of funny. This morning I woke up at like 6, 7 in the morning in my daughter's bed. Then I went to my own bed, and then my wife comes and wakes me up at 7:30 saying, "You're 30 minutes late to work already." I said, "No, it's Shabbat. Go back to bed." So that is why we are doing the video tonight instead of last night, for anybody who was expecting it last night. So I rushed through last week's video a little bit, you know. I mean, it was nice that it was short, but I felt like I really rushed it. So maybe we won't rush as much tonight. But I'm also not trying to take forever, as I've been known to do before. Also, real quick update. I've been talking to Vicky Joy, and she is still on board for doing the David and Goliath video in a few weeks. So right now we're planning at the last weekend of May. Unless something comes up, because I know she's very busy. She's got her new book coming out and all kinds of stuff. So that's what we're planning on at the moment. Shalom to everyone. Okay, so let's see. We stopped at the beginning of 1 Samuel 7, right? Okay. So Samuel speaks to the house of Israel, saying, "If you return unto Yahovah with all your hearts," right, not partially, "then put away the strange gods and Ashtaroth from among you. Prepare your hearts unto Yahovah and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hands of the Philistines." So there's still this ongoing issue with the Philistines, even though this is after the return of the Ark of the Covenant, right? So even though there was that whole issue that we talked about last week with the Philistines with the Ark of the Covenant, and they had the the statue of Dagon and the house of Dagon, the worship house, got destroyed, right? And I speculated as to how Yah might have used an angel for that. Even after all of that, after all the mice and the tumors, the emerods, in the secret places, all the pain and all the death that the Philistines had in their 5 cities with their 5 kings, even after all of that, there are still issues with the Philistines. The children of Israel did put away Balaam and Ashtaroth. So these are 2 false deities, evil entities that they were worshiping at that time. They put them away and served Yahovah only. And Samuel said, "Gather all of Israel to Mitzpah, and I will pray for you unto Yahovah. I will intercede. I'll be the in-between, standing in the gap," right? And they gathered together to Mitzpah and drew water and poured it out before Yahovah. So you've got this water offering, the pouring out. This is not the one and only time that we see this in Scripture. And there's a lot to be said about that, but I'm not going to get into that tonight. So they poured out the water before Yahovah and fasted on that day and said, "There we have sinned against Yahovah." And Samuel judged the children of Israel in Mitzpah. And when the when the Philistines heard that the children of Israel were gathered together in Mitzpah, the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And when the children of Israel heard it, they were afraid of the Philistines. So they saw this as an opportunity. They were gathered in one place. And they saw this as a battle opportunity. They're not spread out. It's a lot easier when you can surround a target when it's unified in one position. And the children of Israel said to Samuel, "Cease not to cry unto Yahovah our Elohim for us, that he will save us out of the hand of the Philistines," right? They're saying, please keep praying on our behalf, showing that they trust the relationship and connection of this prophet, priest, judge, Nazarite, more so than their own relationship, their prayer relationship with the Father. And so Samuel took a sucking lamb and offered it, right? So it's young, offered it for a burnt offering holy unto Jehovah, right? And Samuel cried unto Jehovah for Israel, and Yah heard him. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But Jehovah thundered with a great thunder that day upon the Philistines and discomfited them, and they were smitten before Israel. It's kind of funny. We see the Father using weather here to discourage, discomfort, right? Made them a little bit less encouraged, less ready, less battle ready in the mindset, right? A lot of times your state of mind will affect your warfare, whether it's spiritual or normal warfare or whatever. It's kind of funny how much the mindset has a role to play in that. If you recall, before the Ark of the Covenant was stolen, they were scared, the Philistines, and then they were able to gather up their courage. Not so in this case. So the men of Israel went out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and smote them until they came under Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it between Mizpah and Shen and called the name of it Ebenezer, saying, hitherto hath Jehovah helped us up to this point, right? From this point and forward, really. So the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the coast of Israel, and the hand of Jehovah was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. The hand of Yah was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. Again, this is not the only time we see this, where we have a king or a judge or a prophet of Yah that is so in alignment with the Father that we will see that there was a time of peace or a lack of issue with certain tribes or enemies of Israel during that person's lifetime. But as soon as that person passes on, they no longer have that individual, that godly man standing in the gap, holding the position firm, and they just go by the wayside, right? So the cities, because look, it says all the days of Samuel. The cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored back to Israel, from Ekron even to Gath. Recognize those two city names from last week's study. And the coast thereof did Israel deliver out of the hands of the Philistines, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. So not only was Yah's hand against the Philistines, but there was actually shalom, peace between Israel and the Amorites during this time period. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. And he would go from year to year in circuit to Bethel, Gilgal, and Mizpah. He would circle around. He'd make his travels every year and would judge Israel in all those places. And his return to Ramah, for there was his home, and there he judged Israel, and there he built an altar unto Jehovah. And it came to pass when Samuel was old, we're in chapter 8 now, it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the names of his son, right, and we see a differing version interpretation of one of the names here in, was it 1 Chronicles 6, where we see that the genealogy there showing that Samuel was indeed a Levite through Elkanah, his dad. We get the names of the two sons in there as well, if I remember correctly. But here in 1 Samuel 8 says the name of his firstborn was Joel, which I think is the name that differs a little bit in the Chronicles. And the name of his second is Abiah, and they were judges in Beersheba, right? And his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre and took bribes and perverted judgment. So they were taking gain. They were willing to look the other way for money. They were turning aside after lucre, bribes, and perverted judgment. And they were supposed to be judges. And it's kind of funny. You see this shift in spiritual seasons going from Samuel, who was surely keeping righteous judgment, and you see the effects from that. When you have a true godly man in the position judging with righteous judgment, you see, and we see this in the Torah, that it affects the Israelites, but it also affects neighboring camps, other peoples, other nations. So as I say, when you have a true man of God as a leader, righteously dividing and performing righteous judgment, it actually blesses the entire world to some degree. And we see this going all the way back to Abraham, right? So now we have a shift in the seasons, right? Samuel is no longer that position. Now his sons are in the judgment position as judges, and they're turning aside from the path. So of course that's going to affect the Israelites, and it's going to affect throughout the world. And you have that ripple effect. So all the elders of Israel gathered themselves together and came to Samuel in Ramah, right? And said to him, behold, you're old, and your sons walk not in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. Look at the language there, right? You're old. You can no longer keep the position. You're too old. You're in retirement stage, and we know that you're nearing your deathbed. And your two sons that you've put in the position for judging are not judging righteously. They don't have the wisdom. They don't have the understanding. They are not following Torah. They are not in alignment with the Father. We can see this. It's very evident. So their solution is make us a king to judge us like all the other nations. Look at the phrasing there. Like all the other nations. They're literally in their mind and in their heart looking at everybody else and saying, let's do what they do. Let's be like the world. Obviously, this whole prophet and judge thing is a system that is flawed in their mind and in their heart, right? But it's not the system that's flawed. It's just the two sons of Samuel. I mean, they could have been interceding. They could have been praying. They could have been asking Samuel to help with casting of lots to find the next person to take his place instead of his sons. Which, I mean, I suppose in their eyes maybe they're doing, but they're really not, right? Give us a king like all the nations, like the Gentiles. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel goes into prayer. See Samuel's response to an issue. And he goes and prays to Yahovah. And Yahovah says to Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people, and all that they say unto you, for they have not rejected you, but they've rejected me, that I should not reign over them. And that is why we use the image. I actually had two different images for tonight's study, and I had a couple of different titles. I was thinking about God dethroned, and I knew that would raise eyebrows, and I knew that would get some clicks, and I knew that it would rub some people wrong, because obviously you can't dethrone God. God has never been dethroned and never will be. But I'm not talking about the dethroning of God in reality. I'm talking about dethroning of God in the heart and mind of the people of Israel, in which case he was dethroned. Look at this. Yah is telling Samuel, this is not an issue that they have with you. This doesn't even come down to their issue with your sons, even though they're using that as their argument. Yeah. First you have Eli's sons, Aaron's sons, now Samuel's sons, for sure. Still Levites. And Yah says that their issue is with me. It's not you they've rejected. It's me they've rejected. And it's kind of funny, too. It kind of seems like Yah is hinting that this was how Samuel's perceiving it. I'm not going to ultimately say that that's the case, but when you see Yah's response, he sees what we don't, right? He sees the hearts. He sees the mind, more so than what we see of our own hearts and minds, let alone others. So it's kind of funny that Samuel is disturbed by this. And Yah says, it's not you they've rejected, it's me they've rejected. So it almost seems like he's reassuring them it's not that you're a bad leader, and it's not that they have an issue with you. Funny enough, though, between the conversation from what we're given here between Samuel and Yah, his sons aren't even being mentioned. Samuel's not saying, I didn't know about this, or can we fix them, or, forgive me for not having raised them in a way. And this is something I hinted at in the first video of the study, right? It's kind of funny. Samuel is brought up under Eli and ends up taking the position of Eli's sons who were corrupted. And I wanted to bring this up and touch on this just for a second, because I see this all the time on social media, right? And by that, I mean like mostly Facebook, sometimes Instagram. But you'll see in the groups and the chat and comments and things like that, and people have memes, and they'll say, if you raise up your children the right way, if you're a truly godly person and you raise up your children the right way, they will follow in the footsteps. And there are verses like in Proverbs that talk about if you raise up your children the right way, they will follow therein. But at the end of the day, every soul has that free will. Every soul has that accountability for themselves. We have an example here of a righteous, godly man who was in alignment with the Father, interceded on behalf of Israel with the Father, stood in the gap, was a prophet, a priest, a Levite, a Nazirite, a judge, and his two sons did not follow in the footsteps. I bring this up because I see people talk about this all the time. They say, well, you can tell a pastor by his children, right, or his grandchildren. And people like to poke at leadership. And usually people who are quick to judge and critique leadership, whether they're accurate in their critiquing or not, either way, if they're quick to it, typically from what I've seen, it's because they themselves are not used to a leadership position. There's a lot of responsibility that comes to a leadership position, whether you're talking really down low, like a supervisor in a job position, or maybe you just hold a Bible study. Like my position in this is very low on the totem pole doing these videos, But leadership positions, especially the higher up you go, the more responsibility there is. And I think that people in general are so quick to point out and say, well, I wouldn't do this and everything would be perfect. And I definitely wouldn't make those decisions, but you're not. And I'm not justifying bad decisions. I'm not justifying corrupt politicians, corrupt leaders in this nation or other nations throughout the world, whatever, or the corrupt pastors and the corrupt church leaders. I'm just saying that what's going on in their minds and all the factors to some of their decisions that you may disagree with, there might be more to the picture than what you see. Again, not justifying, but I'm just saying these are things we need to think about. It's so easy to point at a leadership position and critique it when you are not in that position nor have ever been. So we have Yah reassuring Samuel about him not being the rejected, but it's Yah. So look at this. Yah's looking at the situation, and he sees in the hearts of the Israelites that they've rejected the Father. And this is why I have that image my wife made. Originally, it was just the throne chair, right? And it had a crown sitting on it. If you look really closely on the image of this one, you can see a little bit of the outline of the crown off to the side. And I said, I just want the empty throne and the crown there. And it shows that like there's a position that is void, right? And again, I'm not talking about the lack of a king in Israel. I'm talking about in their hearts, the throne in their hearts, that the throne, the leadership position of Israel at this time in their minds and in their hearts is empty. It's an empty chair with a crown sitting there waiting for somebody to come fill the spot. But it shouldn't be the case, because whether you have a prophet or a judge or a king, none of that should matter, because the King of Kings is supposed to be your king. The Lion of Judah is supposed to be sitting on the throne in your heart and in your mind. So this is that point in the study where you need to ask yourself and ask the Father of his perception of your heart and your mind and your walk. This is time to self-evaluate, reflect, and then take it to the Father and say, do you sit on the throne in my heart and in my mind? Because surely the Father sits on the throne. But in your heart and in your mind, is it empty? Is it just a crown on a chair? Is it the Father? Is it something or someone else? Is it yourself? It's so easy to, without even realizing it, have something or someone, even if it's an abstract concept, be in that position in your heart and in your mind. That which sits on the throne in your heart and your mind is that which you rely on, that which you put your faith and hope in, that which you trust in. If everything goes bad, that must be secure. And as long as that is secure, as long as the throne is secure, then you're good to go. All throughout the history of man, especially in the Gentile nations, but even in Israel and stuff, going all the way back, you can see this understanding that as long as there is a leader position, there is hope for that nation, for that campaign, for that country, that area, that region, what have you. But as soon as that leader is taken out, that position needs to be filled, or there's this understanding of disarray. I mean, look at what happened with Alexander the Great, right? As soon as he dropped, it got split up and divided. So what is it in your heart and in your mind, in your spirit, that must be securely on that throne? What is it that you tell yourself it is, and is that in truth the actual case? These are things we need to think about. These are things that we need to evaluate and reflect on often. This is not a one-time done deal. Look at Israel has had the King of Kings on that throne on and off. If so is the case with ancient Israel, would it not be with modern Israel today? And I'm not talking about what geographical nation is considered Israel. I'm talking about the true believers, the body of Yeshua. We can tell ourselves that the Father is on the throne in our hearts and our mind, but if it's not true and you die in that situation, you might knock on a closed door that says, "Depart from me, I never knew you." those foolish 5 virgins that were lacking oil in their lamps, they would say, yes, hallelujah, the Father is on the throne of my heart and mind, but it wouldn't be the case in truth. Those knocking on the door saying, do we not do miracles in your name? Do we not cast out demons? Was there not healings? They would have said, yes, 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 speak truth. You're saying wonderful things. I'm right there with you. The Father is on the throne of my heart and my mind. And they would truly believe that. See, this is the thing about deception. This is what it means to be deceived. It is possible to have a false sense of security. It is possible for you or me or whoever to sit there and say, I know I am saved, when in truth, they lack the indwelling of the Spirit. I'm not saying these things to discourage. I'm saying these things because the whole point of this show, not just this episode, but the show in general, the whole point of DNG 144, the whole point of Draw Nigh, the creative series at Take on the World TV, the whole point of any of the ministry stuff that I feel led to do, that I believe I'm led to do, is to point people back into making sure that they have a personal spiritual relationship with the Father. That's what this study is really beckoning. The moment things get hard, the moment the Samuel in your life is on his deathbed, and whoever takes the next position is perverting judgment, taking bribes, looking for gainsay, things are going awry, there's a storm in your spiritual walk or in your surroundings, the moment you see those things, what is your response? Who do you seek to be on the throne? Do you have that personal relationship? So you can have that personal relationship and come out of alignment and get back in alignment. That is possible. I'm not even talking about that. Because if you've had a true personal relationship with him and you've walked, you've backslidden, you've pulled to the side, then you hear him calling you. You know these things. I don't need to tell you that you can have a personal relationship. You already know it. I'm talking about those who are not sure. I'm talking about those who tell themselves and say, well, I pray and I do this and I do that. I believe the Bible's true. I believe the God of the Bible is true. But if you don't know that you know him, again, not here to discourage. I'm here to emphasize in your heart and in your mind, hear these words. Seek him. And if you're like, I don't know what that means, then go into prayer and tell him you don't know what that means. Be open in your heart and mind to hearing and receiving whatever from him. In my experience, that's what gets you there, is being willing to hear what you don't want to hear, but going forward and saying, okay, there's a good chance I'm not gonna like this, and this is gonna get uncomfortable, and I'm gonna hear things I don't want to hear. Being ready to hear what you might think is the worst thing ever, so that you can find out for yourself rather than just assuming. And this is what we see in churchianity. There's a lot of assumption. They assume for themselves, they assume for their family, they assume for their pastors, they assume for their friends. I know so-and-so is saved. I know so-and-so is saved. They say good things. They say scriptural things. They say spiritual things. Folks, I'm telling you, all throughout the scriptures, there are examples of the Father speaking through people, truth, prophecies even, through individuals that aren't even in alignment with the Father. I know it's a bit heavy, huh, tonight? Okay, back to the study. It's not you they've rejected, it's me they've rejected, said Yehovah, that I should not reign over them. Hence the fading lion. They rejected the King of Kings in their heart and their minds. They're not even recognizing this. Do you see this? In this text, Israel isn't saying, alas, we have chosen, the Father is not our King of Kings, we want a man for a king. They didn't say that because they don't actually believe that's the case. That's the true case in their heart, but they don't see that. They're not able to discern that. They're deceived. Their heart is in a wicked position, and therefore they don't realize. What they say is that they want a physical king. And in their minds and in their hearts, that is not replacing the Father. They put away Balaam and Ashtaroth, right? During the time of Samuel. Things have gotten good. There's peace with the Amorites. The Philistines, the hand of Yah is upon the Philistines. You see, things got good. It was a season of comfort. And often when things get too comfortable, the plant starts to grow more leaves than fruit. It starts to provide shade for itself. There's no need for survival. There's no stress. There's no discomfort. So it gets shady. And that's when the Father comes along and prunes it so that the plant feels uncomfortable, starts to fear for its life, and puts out fruit to get seed so that there can be continual. Because you need the death for those seeds to take place, right? Often we get in these spiritual seasons where things are awry and a wreck, and we feel like it's a storm, and we're trying to not pay attention to the winds and the waves, but be focused on Yeshua as we try to step out on the boat, keeping eyes on him, laser focus, walking on water like Peter. And you feel your faith strengthen. You feel the Father guide you. You're uncomfortable. You're scared, but you're trusting in him and giving it to him and submitting to him, and you grow, and you're dropping things left and right, and things are just amazing, but you're uncomfortable. And then you get into a season of promotion, a season of blessing and shalom that is more so than prior and after. And we no longer see the point of getting out of the boat. There's no wind and waves. What's the point of trying to walk on water? Sit back, kick back, relax. Yeah, we grow fat, says MB, like Eli. Complacency kills is something that we used to say when I was in the military. I've talked about this before in videos on Take on the World. Even back when I was doing Disputed Lands as the co-host. I think with Nate Wolf and a couple other videos, we talked about complacency killing. Complacency, getting so comfortable that you're no longer on alert. You're no longer feeling like a soldier for Yeshua, battle ready. Because you're comfortable. There's no wind, there's no waves. So you grow shade. Things to think about. They rejected Yah, that he should not reign over them. This is what Yah is succinctly saying, looking into their hearts. I love how he just gets straight to the point. You see this all the time with Yah's perspective and his responses to things. He gets straight to the root of the problem. And how often do we see people's reaction in scripture where they say, no, that's not even, we were talking about this. Why are you talking about that? Because that is the root of the issue. He gets right down to the problem. Straight to the cause. And you see, you go back to Genesis 3. He goes to Adam. Adam points to Eve. He goes to Eve, and Eve points to the serpent. And when he doles out punishments, he starts with the serpent, the cause, the root of the issue. Okay, back to the study. Verse 8 in 1 Samuel 8 here. According to all the works which they have done since the day I've brought them out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim. Look at this. Again, a reference. Ever since I've brought them out of Egypt, according to the works which they've done since that day, wherewith they have forsaken me. Hence the title tonight, Forsaken King. And served other gods, so do they also unto you. Now therefore hearken to their voice. Give them what they want. Howbeit yet protest solemnly to them. Show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. So obviously Yah tells him and warns him and gives him instructions on the manner of the king that they're going to receive. They're going to get exactly what they ask for. Their hearts desire a man leader who acts as a king. And they said, like the nations. Keep in mind, back in that verse there, it said, give us a king like the other nations, like the Gentiles. So Yah says, okay, I'll give you a king. And he's going to be one that does it off of his understanding as a man leader king, just like the other nations. You want to be like them? We'll let you have the test run. See, again, free will. So Samuel tells all the words of Yahovah, everything he was told, to the people that asked of him a king. He said, this would be the manner of the king. Remember, it was the elders that came to Samuel, right? That's how it's supposed to be done properly. The elders come and intercede on those underneath them. They have the wisdom. They sit by the gates. They perform judgment. They have understanding. They're slower to speak, slower to anger, careful with words. They've experienced enough to understand how being rash or emotional or not considering different factors, not listening when having the conversation can have an effect. So it's the elders that came to Samuel. And it says, to the people that asked of him a king. So Samuel says, this will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He's going to take your sons and appoint them for himself. Look at that. A form of adoption, if you will. Kind of like how the government does now, right? He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. Look at that. He's saying he's going to make them his military. They're going to become his defense. And they're going to be on chariots. It's for his horses. He's going to see them as numbers, as a serial number. Soldier so-and-so, rank such and such. It says, and some shall run before his chariots. Look at what's being spoken there. Some of them won't even have the safety of being in a confined structure, but will run and before the chariots. Do you see what he's saying there? Listen, your king's going to take your sons, your young men who are supposed to be getting raised up to lead your household. He's going to take them for himself, form his military, because this is what a logical human mind thinks in terms of leading a nation. I need a military. I'm going to take the young men, put them on chariots, but it says, and some of them will run before the chariots. Bullet sponges is what we called them. Infantry, cannon fodder. That's right, Kelly. Cannon fodder. Look what he's saying. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and over 50s, and will set them to ear his ground, to listen in, to pay attention to gossip and communication, and report back to him. Like those New World Order posters. What's it say? See something, say something like that, right? And we can see that in all kinds of examples. Khmer Rouge is one of my favorites because they start doing that and then they start using the children against the parents, like a Hitler's Youth type of thing. And I talked about this in college like a decade ago, talking about how that's probably going to be the pattern we're going to see moving forward. See something, say something. Government knows better. Big Brother knows better. Forget that Big Brother is Cain. Right? And then the next is the youth. Report on the parents. Report on what you see. Come back and speak to me. I almost said something that I heard not to say. That's interesting. I wonder if I would have. Anyways. He will set them to ear his ground, to listen in, and to reap his harvest. His harvest. They're going to reap his harvest. He's not even reaping his own, right? Look at this. Servitude, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of chariots. It's all going to be about the glory of the king, which is his kingdom, right? He will take your daughters, not just your young men, but your women too, your young women, to be confectionaries, to be cooks, and to be bakers. When they could be keeping the homes, he's going to take them to keep his kingdom. This is what man does. You want to give up your spiritual authority to another man? You want to let somebody else dethrone the Father in your heart and mind? It's going to take your sons and your daughters. Your daughters to be confectionaries, cooks, and bakers, and he will take your fields and your vineyards and your olive yards, even the best of them, and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth. Look at this, 10%. What does that make you think of? He will take your tithing. He will take your tenth of your seed, of your vineyards, and give to his officers and his servants, because, this is how you build up a kingdom. He will take your men servants and your maid servants and your goodliest young men. He's going to take the best of what you have to offer and make it his own. Your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take a tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. And you shall cry out in that day because of your king, which ye shall have chosen you, and Yahovah will not hear you in that day. And Israel responds saying, "Woe is to me, repent, repent, we have messed up, we made a bad decision. We've dethroned Yahovah in our hearts and our minds. We take it back, right?" Nope. Let's get this right. They recognized Samuel as a prophet. In chapters prior and studies prior, in the past couple of weeks, there was a verse that said that the Father made that none of Samuel's words would hit the floor, meaning they had fruit. Whatever he said, Yah would honor it, and Yah was guiding his lips and his words. And it said, so that all will see that he is a true prophet of Yahovah. Samuel was considered a righteous prophet, priest, judge, Nazirite, leader, elder. Nobody was questioning on whether or not Samuel was in alignment with the Father. And they say to Samuel, make us a king. You know righteous judgment. You're the one who prays on our behalf. You appoint us a king. And Samuel says, okay, I went to the Father and he said, you're going to regret this. He's going to take everything that's yours, at least 10% of it, and make it his own. He's going to take your sons and your daughters. It's going to be all about building up him and his kingdom. And there will be a day that you will cry out and the Father will not hear you. That is his speech. And much like other prophets' speeches that are very similar, with warning, dripping with warning of, look at what you are deciding. Look at your heart. Look at what you have asked for. And the Father's actually going to give you what you asked for, and you're going to regret it. And look at the reaction. Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. They said, no, we will have a king over us. Meaning Samuel's speech came with an understanding of, take it back, repent. This is the type of king you're going to end up getting. I mean, maybe in their hearts and their minds, they figured this was Samuel's perspective, but Samuel said that this is what Yah told him. This is what he told them. Look at the very beginning of his little speech there. Look what he says. Samuel told all the words of Yahovah, right? And for whatever reason, seemingly, as it seems to me, they assumed that this was just Samuel's perspective. And it's almost like, yeah. Go back to your deathbed. Make us a king. I know you're worried about all those issues, but that won't happen. And even so, whatever. We want a king. We want to be like the other nations. We see this with companies. We see this with ministries, right? That would be a really good example here. As a ministry, a congregation. A pastor should be in that Samuel position when it comes time for retirement. Or maybe there's a shifting in seasons and he starts falling out of alignment. The bishops, the deacons, the elders, the committee boards start saying, hey, we should do this, we should do that. And they start looking at the way that the world does things. We need to bring in more seats. We need the pews to be full. What can we do to draw them in? Let's do this like the world does. And Yah says, fine. That's what your heart wants. You can have it. You can be like the world. See, we're not untouchable. Just like ancient Israel, today, you and I and groups and ministries, congregations, Bible study groups, whatever, we can make these same mistakes. We can fall into these same errors. I see the rising of teachers and researchers and pastors and preachers, right? There's usually a flow. And I mentioned this, I don't know if y'all caught it, but I mentioned this months before Skiba passed. I mentioned it in the memorial video of Skiba that we did at Take on the World. When I had my little section, I talked about how I believed at that time, and I'd mentioned it months prior, that I believed we were coming into a season where there was going to be a change in leadership positions. I wasn't expecting Skiba and the other leaders to start passing away, because it wasn't just Skiba, those other ones too, right? Dizdar and Quayle and all these other individuals had health issues and passed off, and now it seems to be a passing of the baton, right? And I'm seeing some of the errors again in the hearts and the minds of the followers of some of the leaders who have risen to that next rank in the ladder. Now, I'm not pointing fingers at the leaders. I'm not saying that the individuals that I believe Yah showed me even before Skiba and the other ones passed away or passed the baton before that season, he was showing me certain things. So-and-so is going to rise up to this one. This one's going to take that one spot. I believe he was showing me a couple things. I'm very careful not to name names because I believe I was led not to. So I still won't do it. Although there was one, if y'all caught it, I did mention that I believe so-and-so was getting a promotion. I didn't say whose spot he was taking, though. But anyways, my point is this. For those of you who know what I'm talking about, who paid attention to these circles, we've seen these leaders drop off in the past 6 months to a year, right? And we see a rising up of the rank, which is natural. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these promotions. But listen, look, pay attention to how those leaders are being viewed by some. Again, it's not all. I'm not saying that this is a reflection of the leader. I'm not even saying that this is a reflection of those leaders' ministries or the people that are underneath them that work with them and stuff like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying when I get on Facebook, when I see live chats on YouTube and I go look at other people's videos and stuff, I see some individuals that have placed some of these very intelligent, very wise men of God with great understanding on a pedestal that makes me think, oof, is he sitting on the throne in your heart? Oof. Yes, he just gave a true prophecy and it's coming to fruition. But who's on the throne in your heart? Yeah, I'm not going to get into all the examples, live checks, talking a little bit about different examples of things. I'm looking more broader scope. I understand the issues with like coffee bars and things like that in churches. I understand that there's bills to pay for a building and things of that nature. And I'm not going to necessarily say I agree or disagree with everything. I've already mentioned before, I don't think if I was in those positions, I don't think I'd be all about locking the doors and having a security camera. Or if you're going to do those things, at least have somebody on site 24/7. I think I that's where I fall, in my opinion. I understand where you're coming at with the coffee bars, but like more so than coffee bars, the gift shops bother me a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but I've been to some non-denominational churches and stuff, and they had gift shops where some of the stuff they were selling was just junk. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And some of the funds that they do and fundraisers and things, and when it doesn't seem to have a biblical purpose, anyways, I'm not going to get into the whole Torah and church congregations and stuff like that. There's so many things that I have to say about that. I'm not going to even get into it because, again, I'm thinking bigger picture than some of the comments right now, and I'm even looking at the most solid circles. It's easy for us to say, oh, so and so is acting goofy and stuff like that. That's fine. There's going to be goofy. I'm talking about our circles. I'm talking about our chat groups and our Facebook, the ones that you like to go into, the ones I like to go into with our favorite people that we believe are genuine believers. Even in those, we are seeing people being placed on thrones in people's hearts that shouldn't be. Even in those, we see a reliance on a leader when it should be the King of Kings. Now, I'm not worried about the goofies. You see it, you recognize it, you pray for it, and you move on. You can point out the goofies all you want in my live chats and stuff like that, but most of the people in this live chat can recognize goofy when they see it. So I don't feel the need right now to be talking to you guys who come in every week with me and do these videos and stuff like that about the goofies. You guys know what I'm talking about when I say the goofballs, the nut bars, the goofy people, right? Forget that. that doesn't edify us to point at them and see their goofiness. You see it, pray for it, move forward. I'm talking about our circles. I'm talking about the tight knit. I'm talking about the actual body. We need to be paying attention to our circles. We need to be paying attention to our walks. And the more you look at the goofies and say, well, I'm glad I'm not them, that's not what this walk's about. And I'm not saying that that's what you guys are doing. I'm just saying we need to be paying attention to these things. We need to be thinking these things. I feel so honored and blessed to be given the opportunity that a lot of the people that come in these live chats and these videos, I do believe are genuine believers and like high quality, in my opinion. And some of the circles that I'm a part of with the Take on the World and some of the other ministry circles that are affiliated with, or their borders come close, or there's a little venture circle where you have a little bit of the overlapping and stuff like that. There's a lot of the cream of the crop, in my opinion, and a lot of my friends and a lot of my friends' friends and my friends' friends are, from what I can see, beautiful, genuine fruit, solid stuff. But that doesn't mean we don't have things to reflect on. That doesn't mean we don't have things to be paying attention to and edifying. All right, moving forward. Nevertheless, people refused to obey Samuel, and they said, "Nay, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations." There it is again. Out of their heart, from their hearts through their mouth, right? It says, "Out of the abundance of your heart comes your words," and they're not seeing it. You guys, they're not even seeing it. That we may be like all the nations, that we may be like the Gentiles. They're supposed to be Kodesh. They're supposed to be Kodesh, set apart, different. It's supposed to be the nation that says, yes, we do things differently because we follow the Father. We follow the One. We're the ones that are led by a pillar of fire and cloud. We're the ones that set up camp when it stops, when the Father tells us to stop. Whether we think it looks like there's abundance of crops and water or not, it matters not, because we care about when the Father says to stop and when the Father tells us to go. That's where I'm at right now. I'm waiting for the pillar of cloud to move, because I really am very appreciative, and I love this house that I've been given for me and my family, but we've been feeling ready to move. But until the Father says, okay, pack up, let's go, and gives me, where am I going? I'm not doing anything. I'm waiting. I'm trying to wait for that movement. That's what we're supposed to be doing in our walks. That's what we're supposed to be doing as a congregation, as a group. We're supposed to be looking out for each other. You see somebody in our camp packing up their tent, but the cloud hasn't gotten up, say something out of love. Say, hey, are you sure the cloud is moving? Because from my perspective, it might not be moving. Now, don't assume that they're in the wrong. Different members of the body, different roles, different gifts. They might be led. They might see the pillar moving and you don't, because you're in a different position of the camp. It's hard to explain that right now, but with visuals, you could be in a position where it's starting to move and you're going to see it before the other camp because you need to be in the front. So I'm not saying correct. I'm saying through love and edification, we need to be watching our circle. Instead of looking at the goofballs outside the camp. They're outside the camp. They're going to be goofballs. We have some goofballs inside the camp. That we may be like all the nations, that our King may judge us, go out before us, and fight our battles. This is the same Israel that says, the Father, Yahovah is our strength. He fights our battles. He goes before us. This is the language you see in the book of Exodus. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. He goes before us. He judges us. He's our king. This is that same language. Out of the abundance of the heart. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he rehearsed them in the ears of Yahovah. He took them back and prayed to the Father. And Yahovah said to Samuel, hearken to their voice. Do as they say. Make them a king. And Samuel said to the men of Israel, go ye every man to a city. All right. Wipe the dust off your feet. Shake the dust off your hands. move forward. Now there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath. I'm probably not getting these right. The son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. That's pretty cool. That means he was, you look at that mighty man of power, you have indications of like a good warrior, right? Valor, right? You're talking good warrior, but you're also talking good leader, right? That it's that Gibor, right? The Giborim, mighty warrior, champion. But and yes, it can be used for the Nephilim giants and stuff like that. But that's not what's being referenced here, in my opinion. It's not saying that Saul and Kish were of the line of Nephilim. It says they're from a man of Benjamin, which I'm not going to go there for anybody who wants to argue the possibilities there. I'll say sure, but I don't see it at all. I could see why somebody would think that, but I'm not buying it whatsoever. Valiant, strong man. This is champion, good leader, not just great warrior, right? And those type of leaders. You've probably known some throughout your life, right? Where you say, "Oh, that's a leader." That person says, "Okay, folks, we're doing this, this, and this. You go do this. You go do this," and nobody questions it. Everybody does it. And that type of leader doesn't have to raise their voice very often. That type of leader doesn't have to plead. That type of leader doesn't have to repeat over and over and over again. He says, and it is done. Like the centurion, right? He says, "I've got people underneath me. I say, and they do. I say, go here, and they go there, and they go here, and they go there." That is what a true good leader is like, right? And he had a son, talking about Kish, whose name was Saul, a choice young man and goodly, and there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. So he was actually physically taller, not just good appearance and humble and things like that. And yes, I will say humble because that is, we have scripture we'll go over later in a different study where it shows that in this timing, Saul had a humble view of himself. He did. That is a scriptural understanding. But we see, not only did he have that goodliness in terms of his mannerisms and his behavior and how he treated people and things like that, but he also had a good appearance, right? It was somebody that you would, in your flesh state, think, that's a good guy. That's the guy I would let my niece marry, whatever kind of thing, right? But he was taller than all the others, shoulders and upward, right? So I've been thinking about this all week about what that would be, and so many people get this understanding of the ancients being small people, and I would argue that is a very silly assumption. So I'm not going to get too much into it right now, but an interesting route, if you look into the whole caveman skeletal remains, you will see that their jawbones and their eyebrow ridge is extended, right? And this is why you get those museums and they look kind of different, right? They got that strong, heavy upper brow, and they look like, in our society, we look at them and say they weren't intelligent, right? But the bone structure of that jaw and upper brow and other things about the bone density, the calcium deposits, things like this. If you really study it out, which I did like 4 or 5 years ago, it's an indication that those individuals live longer. It's not that they were cavemen and that they were dumb and that they were, obviously it wasn't an evolutionary step between ape and man and things like that, right? That brow ridge and jawline and things like that was an indication that they were living longer, right? Which we know, especially in the book of Genesis, right? You look at those skeletal remains, and I'm not talking about the Nephilim. They had a whole different cranium. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, but they had a split like this, not like this. It's a whole thing. It's very interesting. If you're curious, Trey Smith has some stuff on his Nephilim video. His Noah video goes over a little bit. Brian Forrester, Foerester, he has some pretty interesting things about the elongated skulls. That's what they call them, with the Nephilim skulls from Peru and all these different places. I've spent a couple of years studying in depth on those topics, and Yah willing, Jeff and I will go into that because he has some stuff he's studied, and I've studied the burial sites in more depth than most of your favorite teachers have, I think, because I can point out some patterns that I haven't heard some of these other guys mention in videos. In terms of location, what they were buried with, position of the body, which is like never talked about, except for in a couple books, which is where I got my resource and research on. But I just don't, even these big giant guys, quail and some of the other ones, I didn't see them talking about those things. So if they did, I missed it. But anyways, if you're interested in me and Jeff talking about that, we do plan on going into the burial sites and the skeletal remains and the caloric intake and the size and the bone density and how it shows a 3-to-2 ratio, not a 3-to-1, and what does that mean, and all kinds of different things, right? And how the cranium differs and what does that imply, and were there different abilities? Were they all giants? There are all kinds of fun topics on that. I'm not going to get into all that tonight. But anyways, what we're seeing in scripture here is Saul was tall, shoulders and head upward. All of that bunny trail that I went on to say that, to assume that all the Israelites were like 5 foot to 5'5", in my opinion, on research of the archaeological dig sites and things like that, that's silly. That's silly. To think that there wasn't Israelites that were like 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", maybe not all of them, but some, in my opinion, is a very ignorant assumption. And it comes with this understanding of back then they were weaker, and it's this whole mindset of ascension, even though we've actually been descending. We're living less long. We have this understanding that our technology is advanced, but then you start looking at the megalithic structures, the big stones all throughout the world, the Mayans and in Peru and the Sumerians and the Djoser Empire, all these ancient empires, thousands of years ago, the building of the pyramids and things, all these things. We don't know how they did it then because we don't even know how to do it now. Do you understand what I'm saying? We can't do that now. There is not a crane in existence that can lift those and move those 1 ton, 2 ton stones, those megalithic structures. We can't do it. The precision cuts so that you can't even fit a blade of grass between the stones and these huge, we can't even do it now. So yeah, I'm thinking Saul was tall, okay? And I'm thinking shoulders, head, right? I didn't study it out. I was going to this week, and like I said, this week I was tired a lot, you guys. And it's not even like I had a bad work week or anything. I was just tired. I think I've been in a season where I feel less encouraged to do things. I feel like I'm not doing as much as I should be or something. I'm not getting out, you know. I'd like to be a little bit more active. Anyways, I was tired a lot, so I didn't study on the average, the statistical proof, the biology proof of how long an average person's neck and head is, because I wanted to be able to say so many inches, whatever. But I mean, we get the general idea, right? We're talking more than 6 inches, and I'm thinking probably closer to 9, 10 inches. So I'm thinking Saul was closer to 7 feet than not. That would make him stand out. That would make you write a verse that says, shoulders and head, he was above all. When you have a Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, 6'6", 6'7", up to 6'10", 6'11", somewhere in there, that stands out. Now, that allows you to have a couple of Israelites, the Proto-Canaanite Israelite skeletal remains that have been shown to be 6'1", 6'2", still not be as tall as Saul, and Saul still stick out. And he would be head and shoulders above those. So I'm going with 6'3" being the tallest on average, the average probably being under 6 foot by a little bit. And I'm thinking Saul, 6'7" to 6'10", somewhere in there. That's what I'm personally thinking. Mud Fossil University, yeah, he's got all kinds of cool stuff. There's some of the things that he said that I wasn't 100% convinced of, but it is cool stuff. So I'll put it on the screen here for anybody who's not understanding. I remember the first video I came across of his was that the mud fossil of the boot with the foot in it, and it was a rock, but he showed with the veins proving that it was actually a foot. Man, I'm telling you, and that whole study leads to so many different rabbit trails. You've got the verses talking about even the stones will cry out. You've got all kinds of fringe upon fringe topics here, Medusa, Gorgon types that were said to have been able to make people into stone. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily true, but it makes you wonder if there was some Nephilim entity, demonic things that could do those things, or was it effects from floods? There's all kinds of interesting theories, things I'd like to get into with Jeff, Yah willing. Him and I we've talked in the past about wanting to get into the weird, fun topics, because him and I have studied some of the cryptozoological studies enough to where we can actually say, you know what, this is what I see. And it's not just speculation of, well, I think this, I think that, but actual, well, there are maps that show this, and there are books that show this, and there are professionals that have written in journals that have shown sightings of certain things. That doesn't mean everything, but we need to, so, Yah willing, Jeff and I would love to go into topics like that. Let's see. Put this guy's armor a little bit. Yeah, it is jumping ahead, MB, but that is something I wanted to get into with Vicky Joy. We have so much for that video, MB, and I know you love heavy details. So I think out of all the videos in this study, that's going to be the video that you're going to enjoy. And if any videos in this study get anywhere near the quality of Exodus or on the same level with the Exodus study that we did here, it's going to be that video. Because Vicky Joy and I have quite a lot of information, and I'm going to be bringing in all kinds of information that you've never even heard. I'm willing to bet 90% of the stuff I'm going to bring, 90% of you have never even heard in terms of the statistics and understanding and details that I have been able to figure out about the battle at the Valley of Elah. But that's for then. Rock energy, water memory, giant trees. Yeah, those are all fun stuff. Fun fringe topic things, as long as you're getting meat as well, Okay, so back to the thing here. I just wanted to say that I think, me personally, I'm not saying this is the case, but me personally, I'm pegging Saul at 6'6" to 6'10". That's where I'm putting him. Closer to 6'10" is what I'm thinking. 6'9", 6'10", somewhere in there. Okay, so the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. And Kish said to Saul, his son, "Take now the servants with you and rise and go find them," right? And so Saul goes with his servants, with the servant, and passes through Mount Ephraim and passed through the land of Shalisha, but they found them not, right? So then they passed through the land of Shalim, and they were not there. And he passed through the land of the Benjamites, but found them not. And I bet you, I don't know if Karen's going to be in here tonight or anything like that, but I bet you Karen and that Bible study crew has studied this out to see the journey. I bet you can mark out and even get an idea of timing of how long it would take and how much terrain he would have to go through. I think that'd be a fun study if you're looking into it. If you want to get into some weird things, not weird, but like weird details of like, it'd be fun to know. Maybe in this study, that'd be a fun one to get into. If I was doing this Exodus style, that's what I would have done. I would have looked into mapping to see where those towns were at and how he passed through it and how long it would take. So they came to the land of Zuph. Saul said to a servant that was with him, "Come and let us return, unless my father leaves caring about the donkeys and starts being concerned for us." And he said to him, "Behold, now there is in the city a man of God," right? A prophet, a seer. And he's an honorable man, right? He's not just a prophet, but a true prophet of Yah. And all that he says comes surely to pass. Remember what I said earlier about there being multiple verses that shows that what Samuel says happens. There is truth. Yah said he would not let the scripture says he didn't let the words hit the ground. That is literally, looking at that from a standpoint of literature and writing, I love how that is poetically written. That is one of the things I love about the Bible too. It's just, there's no book like the Bible, and I have a great joy and high standard, in my opinion, for quality writing. This is one of the reasons why I also love Vicky Joy's writing. She is a very talented, skilled writer with high quality. We have some friends who've written some books with some good content. And no, I'm not pointing at Jeff or anything like that, since he's been the recent. But there's other friends who they've written books and there's good stuff in there. But their writing was not a writer. The content was good, but they're not a writer. Vicky Joy is a writer. You know what I mean? Like, she is a writer. And with scripture, you can see that the Father he is a writer. And he goes beyond. I just love how scripture is written. All right, so there's in the city a man of God, and he's honorable, and all that he says comes to pass. Now let us go. Peradventure, he shows us the way that we should go. Right, so maybe he'll show us which way to go. Maybe he'll show us where to find the donkeys. We can go back, and then the dad won't be concerned and things like that. So Saul says to a servant, "But we have what should we bring him? We have nothing to give him. The bread is spent. We've eaten our bread." And there's nothing to present, not a present to bring to the man of God. What have we? And then the servant answers Saul, "I have here at hand a fourth part of a shekel of silver. We'll give that to him," right? And we're just asking for the direction of the donkeys. It's not like we need a lot. That should be enough. Before time in Israel, at this time period, when a man went to inquire of God, he would come and he'd say, "Let us go to the seer." for that which is now called a prophet, before time was called a seer, right? And so it's the same office, the same understanding, seeing ahead, being able to see things that require spiritual eyes, right? And we see the New Agers and the world have their palm readers, their tarot card readers, people who talk to the dead and Ouija board people, all kinds of weird, goofy, nonsense stuff, right? Healing crystals and all kinds of weird New Agey things. And the world has a desire for those things because there is a version of that type of stuff that can be true, and they're not seeing it. Why? Because when they think of Christianity, they think of the Catholic Church. They think of your other non-Catholic, because they're pretty Catholicized in my opinion, other churches. They go in there, everybody sits down, you have a pastor who preaches a good sermon, and maybe it's good and convicting, maybe it's a word in due season, awesome. But they are not seeing the spirituality of a person who's in that position, a seer. They're not seeing that, right? They're seeing televangelists. Put your hand up to the TV, and if you say, I declare this, the Father will give you blank, blank, blank. Sow a seed of money into my ministry, and you'll get blank, blank, blank. And they see right through that, because that's less accurate and spiritual than the New Agers with their palm reading and their tarot cards. Those people are actually talking to entities. Those people are actually being spiritual. Those people get some of it right. That's how they continue in those practices. If they got everything wrong all the time, they wouldn't have an office. Oh, that is awesome. You know, it's funny. My daughter's also been wanting me to read Samuel to her lately, and she doesn't know that that's what I'm doing the videos on. So I think that's just so neat. And I think ECF moved from Exodus to Samuel, which I thought was funny because I moved from Exodus to Samuel. But yeah, that is so cool. You know, I've seen this a lot in my walk, and it's not like if you see this, then those are the alignment, and anybody who's not, that they're not in alignment. But I do see that the Holy Spirit moves in waves, so that so as to say this, right? I've got 3,000 or something like that friends on Facebook, and I'll go through the newsfeed and it only lets me see like 7% of them, right? Because that's how the algorithms work. And I'll see like a pattern of 3 different things. And of all the people in my newsfeed, most of those people, 85-90% of those people fall into one of those 3. They're all feeling this verse or this verse or this verse. And I think it's amazing because it shows that the Spirit is moving, and it's kind of like, in my opinion, it's an indication of, okay, this person is part of the body that's an arm, this person is part of the body that's a foot, and this person is a part of the body that's an ear or an eye or a mouth or whatever. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that can be the case sometimes. But it is interesting. So I've been noticing that you're not alone, AC, with me on that, my household, your household. I've seen others as well that lately, the past 2-3 weeks, have been feeling led to do 1 Samuel. How funny is that? You say the past 2 weeks, this is number 3. So this is the 3rd week for this study. So it's like the same season. I just think that's neat. That's so cool. The Father definitely does stuff like that. Anyways, so Saul says to the servant, let's go. And they went up the hill to the city, and they found the young maidens that went out to draw the water, and said to them, is the seer here? And they answered him and said, he is. Behold, he is here before you. Make haste now, for he comes today to the city. He's coming into the city today. For there is a sacrifice to the people to this day in the high place. Timing clue there. I'm not going to get into it right now because I just don't feel led to do that. But I have reason to believe that that's indicating certain days over other days. And as soon as you come into the city, you shall straightway find him before he goes up to the high place to eat. Another clue there. For the people will not eat until he comes. Another clue. Because he does bless the sacrifice, and afterwards they eat that be bidden. Right? So the whole eating afterwards, that's part of the clues there. Now, therefore, get you up, for about this time you will find him. Right? So that he's coming up for the day. And so they went up to the city, and when they came into the city, behold, Samuel was coming out towards them to go towards the high place. So they got perfect timing. This is divine intervention. This is, what do they call that? Not providential. They have a term for that. Divine appointment. Right? When you meet somebody or you have a conversation, you hear something you click onto a video and you're hearing exactly what you need for that moment. Divine leading. You heard what you needed to hear. You're getting confirmations and things like that because the Father wants you to receive what you need to receive from that and to not doubt it and things like that. How cool is this, right? They come up and they say, "Is this here?" Yeah, go, keep going. You're gonna catch him if you just keep going ahead. And they catch him on his way up to the high place. Look at the physical representing the spiritual of what they're saying, right? He's ascending in terms of in his worship in that position, right? About to go on behalf of the people to bless sacrifice, right? There's some things being indicated in the language here, okay? And no, Samuel's not on his deathbed yet, right? I was hinting at the fact that they were probably looking at him. They kept saying he's very old, so they're thinking it's probably around the corner. But obviously, he's still hiking up high hills. He's still doing his thing, right? So obviously, he's not on his deathbed yet. I wasn't saying he was. I'm just saying it seemed like Israel was quick to think it's coming around the corner. We need somebody to take his place. Okay, so as they're coming into the city, okay, think about this. As you're coming into the city, what do you see when you come into the city? You're starting to see the borders, right? That's what makes a dominion, a stronghold. There needs to be borders, right? So whether it's a small, like we see the ancient rubble where it's just a couple stones passed on each other that are all the way along, right? Or whether it's actual gates and things like that, you're coming upon the borders, okay? So it's like passing from one room to another, going through those arches, through those portals, right? Where there is a shifting spiritually. Keep in mind, there are many verses that say, do not move borders. We are instructed by Yah not to do that, to not move borders. This is why there's some issues with Palestine and Israel and stuff. There's some leaders in the Middle East that are not paying attention to what the Torah is saying. There's even been some decisions of the nation of Israel, geographically speaking, in terms of how the secular world refers to Israel, that they wanted not all the lands that they want, but there was at least one portion of land that they were asking for that was not given to Israel. That doesn't belong to them. So these are things we need to think about when you're looking at like end time stuff that's going on now, the moving of borders and stuff like that. It's not a good thing. So he's coming up upon the city. We're coming up upon the gates where the elders would sit, where there would be judgment, right? Righteous or otherwise, there would be judgment there, where a matter is heard out, is at the gates of the city, the entrance. This is where they keep an eye on who's coming and going, right? So this is where they come across them. They're coming up on the city, and Samuel's coming out to go towards the high place. And Yahovah had told Samuel in his ear. He heard it in the spirit the day before Saul came, saying, tomorrow about this time. I don't know about you guys, but I've actually had experiences like this, where you hear the Father tell you something, and it's detailed, like, just you wait by the end of this week, tomorrow, in 2 days' time, whatever. I've had moments like that, more than just a couple. It doesn't happen all the time, and it can be many months or even more than a year, I think. I haven't really mapped them out, but I've had enough of them to know that, this can happen now because it does. I've experienced it. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't. It is really neat when it comes through, you're like, okay, yeah, that definitely was him, because in the moment you don't doubt, but then afterwards you're like, oh, but what if I wasn't hearing right? What if that was my mind? What if I was imagining things? So you don't want to say anything. Tomorrow about this time, he's telling Samuel in the spirit, tomorrow, this time of day, tomorrow, I'm going to send a man out of the land of Benjamin. He's even telling him where he's coming from. And you're going to anoint him to be captain over my people, Israel. Look at the language there is captain instead of king. Isn't that funny? That he may save my people out of the hands of the Philistines. Look at this is the purpose. You guys see this? You ever catch this before? This is the reason. And Yah's purpose overall. I mean, you have the teaching of a lesson to Israel. There's all kinds of layers to the onion, but this is one of those layers. Because there's issues with the Philistines. And the Father wants to do away with it because, remember, in all the days of Samuel, right? That he may save my people out of the hand of the Philistines, for I have looked upon my people because their cry has come unto me, right? And so when Samuel saw Saul, Yahovah said to him in that moment, behold, look, pay attention, behold. Behold is not just look, but like focus in on, pay attention, take heed, look, focus, notice, Behold, the man whom I spoke to you of, This same shall reign over my people. How cool is that, right? And this isn't the only time that Samuel is told, this is the man you're going to anoint as king, right? So then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate. In the gate, folks. Look at it. Look at all the little factors here, the little tidbits. Samuel answered Saul. Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate, right? It says Saul came close to Samuel. Samuel was coming up towards him. Saul came near to him in the gate and said, where it's perfect placing for this, tell me, I pray thee, where the seer's house is. He's asking at the gate. That's the perfect place to ask for where the prophet is at. And Samuel answered Saul and said, I'm the seer. Go up before me unto the high place. Turn around. For ye shall eat with me today, and tomorrow I will let you go. And I will tell you all that is in your heart. You're going to eat with me today. Tomorrow we're going to discuss all the things that's on your heart. That's not for today. Today, let's go eat. Come with me. Right? I want you to now imagine. I don't know if you guys have done this before, but I do this every time, and I love this part of Scripture. Imagine you're in Saul's position. You're a young man. You don't have a high view of yourself. You're literally just been venturing around looking for your dad's donkeys. Okay, so let's say in your life, your parents lost their car or something, whatever fits, right? There's some kind of issue. You're trying to go fix it. You're having troubles going to fix it. So then you go to ask somebody that you know is going to be able to fix it. And he says, come with me. We're going to go eat. Come with me. Tomorrow we'll talk about that. And it's almost like in your heart, like, I don't know about you guys, but when I read this, every time I get this feeling like Saul's all, it's that spiritual, and secular movies do a great job of this, right? In those fantasy movies, you come into a place with fairies or dwarves or something, and all of a sudden you can see the countenance change of the people that are walking in. The burden is off their shoulders. That's what I'm visualizing here with Saul. He's forgotten the donkeys. You can just feel it. He feels lighter. Come with me to the high place. We're going to go eat. Keep in mind, this is a spiritual thing. They're going to go up and eat the food after it's been offered and sacrificed, right? And it's going to be blessed by a prophet, not just a prophet, but at the time, the prophet. And I would argue throughout the Bible, one of the best prophets ever. Like, this is one of the best ones, Samuel, right? Oh yeah. I'm sure the sons of Samuel were not too happy about this, But I mean, at the same time, it's not like it's not like in their heart that they were worried about the betterment of Israel. So as to say, when you deal with side dealings, bribery, illegal stuff, things you shouldn't be doing on the side, having conversations behind closed doors that shouldn't be having, things like that, for gainsay and things like this, you're doing it for the results of that. So as to say, I'm not saying that they weren't angry and hateful and bitter about the situation, but it's almost like that's truly the result that their heart wanted. They weren't even in their mind and heart thinking we could become kings. If they were thinking that, they would have tried to play the role better. Do you see what I'm saying? Their expectations were a lot lower. Their standard, the aim, the target for them was what they gained from it. They got their heart's desire. So I just want to mention that there's that little thing. But yeah, that's a really good point, Kelly, because Saul does talk about later, they hint at people who despised Saul and refused to take him as king and all that stuff. And I would argue that you're right, Kelly, that those people and those verses that we're going to be talking about probably next week, the sons of Samuel, who were called the sons of Belial, right? They were sons of Belial. They would have been amongst those people simply because they were spiritually wicked. I think we can make that a fair assumption just because they were wicked alone, let alone their position of being a descendant of Samuel and thus thinking that they deserve the inheritance of the promotion. We don't even see them getting kicked out of the temple. I'm not saying they did or did not. I'm just saying, yeah, Samuel's bomb, right? First Samuel is one of my favorite books of all time. Second Samuel is cool too, but First Samuel is just, I love this book. I love all the Bible, but this is one of my favorite portions of the Bible. I read this and Genesis and Exodus and Joshua and the book of John more than anything else, over and over and over again. Okay, so anyways, Samuel answered Saul and said, I'm the seer. Let's go to the high place. You're going to eat with me today, and tomorrow I'm going to let you go, and I'll tell you all that's in your heart. As for your donkeys, look at this. I love this. You guys, I love this. Can't help but geek on this, right? Can you imagine? He hasn't said anything yet. Saul hasn't indicated anything. And Samuel says, as for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago. So, and I I heard it in the spirit too, that there was that indication of 3 days, which again, there's that 3-day, right? Which is interesting, right? 3 days and a refreshing, a revival of Israel as a nation, right? All kinds of different things. They're going to be delivered out of the hands of the Philistines after 3 days. Journey of Saul, things to think about. Anyways, so you have 3 days of journeying. Whether or not those 3 days travel's worth, I don't know. I mean, were they just stopping and going? In which case, if they just kept moving, that's more than 3 days journey, considering they, you see what I'm saying? But if they stopped and looked at each one, then it's less than 3 days in terms of distance. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense here. It makes sense in my head. As for your donkeys that were lost 3 days ago, don't mind them, for they've already been found. He knows what they're looking for, but he also knows that they've already been found. Right? We have secular movies that do this. Really cool. And like you remember when The Matrix came out, right? And they had that the Oracle, right? I don't know about you guys, but when the first one came out, the first couple times seen it, I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. In secular movies, they hit that. They know how to accurately put in the emphasis, but we don't see this with scriptural movies. Not nearly as often. There's like maybe a handful of Bible movies and shows, maybe 2 handfuls if I'm going to be generous, that I really enjoyed, that I felt were able to get those type of moments down. And they don't even cover much in the Bible, right? There's all kinds of portions like this right here that we don't see being covered in big movies like they should have been. And I'm just saying that there's an actual audience for that. Like secular-wise, thinking dollar signs, there's no reason to not make Bible movies. So obviously the agenda is not about that. Because you'd make some serious money. Look at The Passion with Mel Gibson, and that's not the type of vibe I'm talking about. And they made money. All right. Anyways, I don't want to get started on this. Anyways, look at this, right? The donkeys you're looking for that you didn't even mention to me that you lost 3 days ago, so I know how long it was, what you're looking for. Don't even worry about it, because I know that they're found, even though I'm all the way over here, 3 days journey away from. And on whom is all the desire of Israel. Look at the spiritual way. You know how they show that even in secular movies too, but you see this with the prophets and scriptures, that spiritual language where it's almost like there's depth to it even if you're not able to comprehend. And I think that's kind of the case here with Saul. On whom is all the desire of Israel? And Saul's probably like, what? Is it not you and all your father's house? And Saul answers and says, am I not a Benjamite, of the smallest of the tribes of Israel? We're of the least. Benjamin, the last one. And my family is the least of the families of the tribe of Benjamin. We're at the bottom of the bottom. Why would you say those type of things to me, that the desire of Israel upon me? I'm not of Judah. I'm not of Levi. I'm not of Reuben or Simeon, any of the top 4, right? What are you talking about? Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the parlor and made them sit in the chiefest place among them that were bidden, which were about 30 people. This is invite only. Chiefest place. Remember that verse that says, don't take the best seats for yourself, because of how embarrassing and humbling it is when somebody comes along and says, we don't want you here because we have a special guest of honor. Right? We get to see the other side of that with Saul here. He wasn't expecting to be invited to anything. He didn't even know this was going on, really, right? He wasn't going to be invited. This is invite only. 30 people. It says of those who were bidden. This wasn't open to the public. $30 people. This is a small party. And look at this. I love this, right? You want to talk about like solidifying and verifying and confirming your position as a true man of God who can see in the spirit, hears things. You're just constantly saying things that people, they just doubted what Samuel had to say about a king. And Saul's first interaction, he's already said, I already know what you're looking for. I already know how long you've been gone. Don't even worry about them. I already know that they've been found. What the heck, right? But more importantly, is not the desire of Israel upon you and your father's house. Come sit and eat with me. And then Samuel looks to the cook and says, hey, bring the portion which I gave you, which I said to you earlier to set it aside. Okay. And the cook took up the shoulder that which was upon it and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, behold, that which is left, set it before thee and eat. For unto this time hath it been kept for thee, since I said I have invited the people. So Saul did eat with Samuel that day. You see what's being said here? He says to the cook, hey, you remember that shoulder piece, that best piece, that choice piece of meat? right? And you go back through the Torah portion. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about when it comes to the sacrifices. If you really look at the nitty gritty and all the details of the shoulder part, this Samuel was treating Saul as already anointed king because in his heart and mind, it's already there. Father said it's going to happen. It's not a matter of if, but when. So this is it. That's the guy. And obviously, Father wants to have that anointing on him and things like this. In the spirit of alignment with the Father, you walk in step. So being told the day prior, you're going to come across a man tomorrow, Samuel, and that's going to be the man I want you to anoint as a captain over Israel to take on the Philistines because I want to deliver them because I've heard their cries and their prayers, right? Samuel's reaction, we have that sacrifice, that offering. Oh, man, of course, it's perfect timing. Man, it's so funny how Yah does things. I'm going to set aside the chiefest portion that is meant for people to eat. I'm saying that way on purpose. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to tell the cook to set that aside because I already trust and believe and know that what the Father is telling me is true, that I will come across a person, it will be a divine appointment, and it will be the man who is meant to be made king. Look at this. This is verified a day ahead. Have you ever had moments like that? I kind of have. Not in terms of like a special leader or king or, you're going to anoint this person. Nothing like that, okay? None of these, you're going to have a guest come to your house and you're going to lay hands. Nothing like that. I'm just saying I've been told. I've had some experiences where like, tomorrow or this week or this day around this time when the sun's setting or early in the morning, I've been giving time clues like that. You'll come across so-and-so and this and this and this. Take with you this book or things like that. My wife and I have had experiences like this. We've had things where we took with us where we're like, this is weird. If we didn't hear from the Spirit, then this is really stupid and weird that we're doing this. So I'm just saying the Father does this. He still works like this is what I'm getting at. I've experienced it. According to his will, you could too, as he sees fit. And it solidifies for the others, but it really solidifies for your walk when you sit there and go, I would not have brought this. I would not have said that. I would not have prepared this for that in advance for a person I did not expect, but heard to expect. The cook took up the shoulder, that which was upon it, and set it, and that which is upon it. You see that too? That's offering language in terms of Torah and stuff like that. You can go back to see with Moshe and Aharon and stuff like that. There's some interesting things about that. And set it before Saul, right? And you've got the herbs and spices and things like that. And Samuel said, behold, that which is left, set it before thee and eat. For this time hath these been kept for you. I had this set aside. He even tells him, I set this aside for you. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. And when they came down from the high place in the city, Samuel communed with Saul at the top of the house, right? Because that was common back then. You'd go up on the roof. There'd be a rooftop, like a parapet type of thing. You'd sit up there, which I think is so cool. If there was anything I could bring back from the olden days in American culture, this would be one of those like top 50 things, right? It'd be maybe top 25. I think it'd be cool. I think my family back in Iran back in the day had situations like that. You'd go up on the roof because it's cooler at night in the Middle East, and you have some tea, you have some discussions, whatever, right? Maybe you'd sleep up there. Keep in mind like Rahab, right? With she hid the spies on top of her roof in Jericho, So when they came down from the high place, they communed with Saul on the top of the house, right? And they arose early in the morning, and it came to pass, right? There's that early in the morning, right? About the spring of the day that Samuel called Saul to the top of the house. So Samuel probably slept up there, or he was up early to pray before the sun was up, saying, up that I may send you away. Come on, let's go. I'm going to send you away. And Saul arose, and they went out, both of them, he and Samuel went abroad. And as they were going down to the end of the city, Samuel said to Saul, bid the servant to go on ahead of us. So the servant ahead, but stand here for a minute, that I may show you the word of Elohim, that I may show you what's to come ahead, right? Yes, flatter roofs, indeed. There's a lot of differing architecture on that, but yeah, there would have been at least a portion that would have been flatter for sleeping or resting. You would have tables, and it's kind of like having a back porch type of thing, but it'd be on the roof. Anyhow, okay, so this is a good stopping point. I mean, this has been a short video, and I could keep going, but I kind of just want to break it here, and we'll move forward in the next week, I think. Is there any questions or thoughts or concerns or comments or whatever about what we've talked about tonight from the live chat before we? Yeah, Mets mama slept up there. Oh, why did I put that on the screen? I'm weird. Yeah, slept up on the roof. I thought so. I've asked my fellow things if he had looked at the water heater lately. 2 days later, needed replaced, big leak. Yeah, little things like that. I mean, whatever the experiences are, and you can share it with other people, and if the Father uses it to make them go, whoa, and it encourages them, cool. But sometimes pearls before swine, and you can share those experiences, and somebody goes, yeah, okay, whatever. There's some of my experiences that I don't like to share at all because I feel like it sounds stupid, and if it's not going to be received, then it's not for you. But for me, I can look back and remember, as stupid as it may sound, I know that happened. I know there's no explaining it other than spiritually, and I know what the Father told me. I know that there's no way I would have thought those things or prepared for those things, whatever. I have all kinds of experiences, and those experiences strengthen your walk and your faith and your hope, especially for when he calls you to moments that call for more faith and hope. Those moments where he says, get out of the boat and walk on water. Speak to the rock and you'll get water. Cross the Red Sea. Put your hands out and you'll walk upon dry ground. There are times coming ahead, whether in our lifetimes or not. I think it is, but I could be wrong. But there are times coming ahead, and I know this. There are times coming ahead where those type of experiences, whether reported worldwide or not, will be happening. I'm not saying necessarily that water will split, but I'm not saying it won't either. I'm saying there are going to be big events like this, miraculous events like this. And for the individuals involved, especially the leaders involved in those moments, they have to have had a lot of these little experiences that we're talking about all throughout their walk, because those little things you can doubt and struggle with and think, no, that's not the Father, that's stupid, or he wouldn't say that, or why would he even, no, there's no way he's hinting at this, whatever. You have to have those and a lot of those and see that they're true and walk in those truths and obedience and heed him, because these moments that we're talking about now, you can't doubt those in those moments, or there comes huge consequences. Remember, the waters of Meribah, speak to the rock, and look at what Moshe did. And look at the consequences. He wasn't allowed to go into the land of Canaan. He wasn't allowed to go into the promised land. That's severe, you guys. I mean, his actions, it wasn't just about the physical actions. It was about what was in his heart and what he was portraying to Israel as the leader and what he knew he was portraying, and he did it anyways. I'm just saying, these are things we need to think about. And if you have any hope or desire at all, Yah willing, to be in any kind of experience like that down the road, greater Exodus style, second Exodus style, that whole coming out of Egypt, community unity, whether you see it as homesteading or journeying through mountains or being provided for and spiritually kept hidden while there's government drones and things trying to strike you down and they can't see you because the Father won't. Things that are like that ahead, if you want to be a part of that at all, Yah willing, then you have to be experiencing these small things, and you've got to be trusting and having faith and moving through those things. You have to, especially for leaders. But I don't know if anybody hearing this video, is going to be in a position like that, because the kind of position I'm talking about, those are big positions. That's a very rare thing. But anyhow, things to think about, things I felt led to say. Let's see, is there anything in the comment that I missed? Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed the discussion for there. This study, I enjoy 1 Samuel a lot, which makes me even more down on myself in the past few videos. I'm like, man, it has not been like what it could be. You know what I mean? But it is what it is. It's going to serve the purpose it's supposed to. Yeah. For those who've heard the Spirit, you guys know what I'm talking about, some of that stuff. Maybe you guys haven't experienced some of the other stuff, but you've heard the Spirit tell you some things, no matter how small or big. You know what I'm talking about with that. You've heard the Spirit tell you things, lead you into things, guide you into things, allowed things to happen that made you go, whoa, what? Is anybody else seeing this? You know, test us on little things to prepare for the bigger things, for sure, as well as building up your faith. I mean, that's a big purpose. Whether or not you're there for bigger things is kind of beside the point, in the fact that those little things are a must for your faith, in terms of knowing that you're on the walk, reassuring you. I mean, you see this with those who have bigger anointings throughout Scripture. Maybe not all of Israel that was godly, but anybody who had a role to play, they were definitely, right? Like this, it feels so special. I don't want to spoil it by speaking it. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, exactly, MB. I know. I don't know what you're talking about, but I know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? This can be spiritually applied also for those that are drowning spiritually. Yeah, and I bring these things up not so that people can be like, oh, I've never experienced that, but just think back and look. Maybe there's some moments that you're dismissing and you're not thinking of. But I want to encourage, I want to exhort, I want to edify our circle, our camps, the body. Identify the goofies, pray for them, and move forward. That's what I feel led to do. I don't know about you guys. No, I'm glad you said something about the water heater, Kelly. I feel you on that. I've had moments like that where you don't even feel like the Father's telling you. You just say it, and then boom, and you're like, whoa. I had a small stupid example, but my last job, I had told my general manager, I was like, have you ever thought about buying an emergency backup generator? And they said, no. Why would I do that? 2 hours later, we were out of power for like, I don't know, a day or something. And I remember, like, it was like less than 2 hours. I looked over and I said, hey, do you remember? And I didn't even get to say it. And they said, shut it. I don't want to hear it. And I'd have moments like that all the time at that job. And I don't know if they would even notice. I've told you guys before, for those who've cut the videos, I don't know if it was one of the 6 T-Talk videos or not, but I talked about how before this whole thing 2 years ago, before March of 2020, I had told the GM, I said, hey, something's coming down the pipe. And if they start requiring this, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to do that to have this job. And the GM was like, they're never going to do that. I don't know if that person remembers me saying that, but I've prayed multiple times that the Father reminds them of those little things, especially those things like that, because they also, not so that they can look at me and think, oh, that was weird, but rather get pricked in the spirit of, like, he used to talk about the God of the Bible, and he also called things in advance. Maybe the God of the Bible's real. Okay. All right. We're going to be done for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you learned some things, received some things. Maybe if you didn't learn new things, maybe you got some ideas of a new study that I hinted at that you haven't gone down on. There's some fun trails that we mentioned here, right? With the sacrifice and with the travels, and there's a few things you can get into with just tonight's portion that you can get into some details that we didn't. But at the very least, if you didn't learn something or even get encouraged to do those things, I hope that the Father used this discussion tonight to edify you and exhort you and encourage you to be in the Word, to stay prayed up, to be strong in the Word, to stay prayed up, to draw nigh to the Father. If you haven't initially, to do so. If you have been, to continually do so. And if you've been pulled out of alignment, to come back, to return to do so. So to either initialize, continue therein, or return back to whatever position you're in. I hope that this discussion tonight encouraged you to be in alignment with the Father. Because when it comes to Judgment Day, when everything's said and done and it's all done and over with, that is what you're going to either been thankful of or regret. You're going to be thankful that you got close to the Father, or you're going to regret that you didn't. And it's not even about that. I mean, the process of itself has value. Just being close to the Father. It's not about being close to the Father so you can live forever, so you can get into heaven, so you don't have to go to hell, Hades, Sheol, whatever, whether it's forever or temporary. There's different views, and I don't want to get into all that. My point is, it's not about that. That's just the result. The point is getting to know the Father. That in of itself is what makes the process worth it. I'm telling you, if you don't know that to be true, you can. You don't need me. You don't need anybody else. You don't need a spouse or a child or a teacher, pastor, preacher, prophet, priest, apostle, evangelist, whatever. You don't need any of those to have that happen. You don't need that to be interceding for you in order for that to happen. You can, the veil has been torn. You can come boldly to the throne, seeking him in truth and spirit. And I hope that you do. I hope that this encourages you to do so. Okay. Much love to you all, but keep in mind, keep in memory, as much as I may love you, the Father loves you so much more. He made you. He designed you. He has a purpose for you. He wants to know you. He wants to be close to you. He wants you to walk with him. He wants to be your friend. Scripture actually says that you can be a friend of God. Look at Enoch. Look at Abraham. You know, you've got servant of God. You've got, you know, soldier of God, but you also have child of God, friend of God. Let's remember all those things, because they all point out different facets of what is important. We should be a servant. We should be a soldier, but we should also be a child. We should also be a friend. Okay. Much love to you all. Shalom, shalom. May the Father bless you and keep you according to his will. May he guide you and lead you. May his face shine upon you and give you true shalom for you and your spirit, for you and your household according to his will. So be it.
Yeah. He's alive. It's really just that simple, man. Draw nigh to God, man. Yeah. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you. Draw nigh to God, he will draw nigh unto you.